My life was a canvas, and I was the artist, meticulously painting my destiny with every click of my camera. Little did I know, a sinister hand was about to try and smudge my masterpiece. I'm Adam Beaumont, a 34-year-old independent videographer based in St. Augustine, Florida. For years, I've poured my heart and soul into capturing stories, from the raw beauty of nature documentaries to the heartfelt emotion of intimate family events. It's a calling, a passion that allows me to see the world through a unique lens, and I've built a thriving business from the ground up. My work has taken me to breathtaking locales, earned me recognition, and most importantly, it pays the bills handsomely. I might add, when you're good at what you do, and I pride myself on being exceptional. But to my wife, Sophia's parents, particularly Beatrice, what I do has never been quite enough. Still playing with your little camera, Adam? Her father, Wallace, would sneer during our obligatory Sunday dinners, his tone dripping with condescension. Wallace was a real estate mogul, a man who measured success in sprawling properties and impressive financial portfolios. Every Sunday at their opulent estate felt like an inquisition. Beatrice would dote on Sophia, while Wallace grilled me about my earnings and future prospects. Sophia would squeeze my hand under the table, a silent apology for her parents' relentless scrutiny. Just the week before, I'd been on assignment in the Amazon, braving sweltering humidity and dense jungle to film elusive jaguars for a major streaming platform. I was utterly exhausted, but Sophia insisted we couldn't miss her mother's 60th birthday dinner. Just a couple of hours, she'd promised, her eyes pleading. I should have trusted that cold knot of dread that tightened in my stomach when Beatrice cornered me in the sprawling kitchen. The way her eyes darted nervously around the room before she pressed a tall, frosted glass into my hand, the almost imperceptible tremor in her manicured fingers as she declared, "I made it special, just for my favorite son-in-law." Something felt inherently wrong, but I had no idea how wrong things were about to get. Sophia and I met 7 years ago at a charity gala where my documentary work was being showcased. She was a budding architect, fresh out of her master's program, and I was just starting to make a name for myself in the videography world. We clicked instantly. She understood my relentless drive to capture the world's hidden narratives, and I admired her vision for shaping physical spaces. Her parents, however, were an entirely different story. From our very first encounter, Wallace made it abundantly clear he'd envisioned a different trajectory for his daughter, someone with a corner office, a guaranteed pension, a company car. Someone, in short, exactly like him. Beatrice was more subtle in her disapproval. She'd offer effusive praise for my films while pointedly inquiring when I planned to transition into something more stable. She'd invite me to their lavish family functions, then introduce me as the videographer rather than her son-in-law, as if my chosen profession was merely a temporary eccentricity. For years, I attempted to win them over. I'd bring rare vintages to dinner, proudly display my latest awards, casually mention lucrative contracts with prestigious clients. Nothing swayed their unwavering conviction that I was merely a fleeting fancy in their daughter's life, a phase she would eventually outgrow. Last Christmas, I overheard Beatrice on the phone, her hushed voice carrying clearly through the thin wall. Sophia could have married Dominic, she whispered, a renowned cardiac surgeon, old family money, but she chose the creative one. The way she paused before uttering the word creative made it sound like a terminal diagnosis. Wallace was far more direct. When Sophia and I joyfully announced we were trying to start a family, he pulled me aside, his voice a low growl. "Children are an expensive endeavor, son. Perhaps consider real employment before bringing one into the world." I never relayed these hurtful remarks to Sophia. She adored her parents, despite their glaring imperfections, and I never wanted to force her into an impossible choice. So I plastered a smile on my face, shook Wallace's hand firmly at every visit, complimented Beatrice's elaborate culinary creations, and kept my true thoughts locked away. But there were countless signs, subtle yet ominous, that I should have heeded more seriously. The way Beatrice would suddenly demand Sophia's assistance in the kitchen whenever I spoke about a particularly successful project. How she'd accidentally exclude me from family photographs. The time Wallace suggested Sophia seek therapy for her impulsive decision-making, his gaze fixed squarely on me. I dismissed it all, naively believing that time would eventually erode their prejudices and usher in a quiet acceptance. I was profoundly mistaken. The Friday of Beatrice's birthday dinner, I returned from the Amazon with mosquito bites covering my arms, a lingering cough, and a memory card brimming with footage that would comfortably cover our mortgage for the next 6 months. I was utterly drained, but I forced myself to shower, don a freshly ironed linen shirt, and drive us to their sprawling Spanish colonial home nestled in the exclusive San Marco neighborhood. Dinner began uneventfully enough. Wallace boasted about a recent land acquisition. Beatrice meticulously adjusted the delicate table settings. Sophia's brother, Marcus, and his wife, Isla, engaged in polite, somewhat strained conversation. I nursed a craft beer and silently counted the minutes until we could make our escape. After the main course, Beatrice grandly announced she'd prepared her famous homemade limoncello for dessert. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I, ever the dutiful son-in-law, offered to help carry the glasses. That's when I saw it. She had 2 glasses, distinctly separate from the others, waiting on the counter. As I entered, she swiftly, almost imperceptibly, added something from a tiny, unmarked dropper bottle into one of them. It wasn't a garnish, not a flavoring. It was a clear, odorless liquid, and she tucked the vial away the very instant she heard my footsteps. "Oh, Adam, I've got this," she chirped, her voice a little too bright, a little too saccharine. "This one's for you, a special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My throat constricted. The glass she'd indicated had a barely perceptible film shimmering on the surface, catching the light like an oily slick. "Let me help you carry these," I said, my voice steady despite the sudden surge of adrenaline, and took both glasses she'd prepared. In the dining room, Wallace was engrossed in his phone, barely glancing up. "Limoncello, sir?" I offered, my tone innocent. I deliberately placed the tampered glass in front of him, instead of taking it myself. I watched him take a long, unsuspecting sip, then made a flimsy excuse about preferring water with my dessert. 45 minutes later, Wallace was ashen, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead, as he bolted for the nearest bathroom. The violent, retching sounds of his illness echoed eerily through the house. Beatrice's face drained of all color as the realization of what had transpired dawned on her. Her eyes, wide with a terrifying mix of horror and dawning comprehension, met mine across the ornate dining table. In that excruciating moment, I knew 2 things with absolute, chilling certainty. My mother-in-law had attempted to poison me, and she knew that I knew. I didn't react, didn't confront her, didn't even betray a flicker of emotion. I simply continued to calmly eat my creme brulee, while Sophia, her brow furrowed with concern, rushed to check on her father. In the ensuing chaos, Wallace insisting it must have been a rogue oyster from lunch, Beatrice stammering about bad shellfish, I quietly, almost imperceptibly, pocketed the untouched glass that had been intended for me. Something profound had shifted within me. The anger that simmered wasn't hot or explosive. It was cold, deliberate, and razor-sharp. I wasn't just going to let this go. But I wasn't going to fight their way with their petty manipulations and underhanded tactics. No, I was going to make them face exactly who they were, stripped bare of their carefully constructed facades. The Monday after the dinner, I drove to Jacksonville and took the glass to Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant former client who now ran a cutting-edge forensic toxicology lab. "Personal or professional?" she asked, her gaze sharp, when I explained what I needed. "Family matter," I replied, my voice devoid of inflection. 3 days later, her call came. "Adam, there were sedatives in that drink. Not lethal, but certainly enough to incapacitate someone for several hours, perhaps induce some amnesia. Where did you get this?" I thanked her profusely and requested a detailed written report. I didn't answer her question. That night, I told Sophia I wanted to skip Sunday dinners at her parents' for a while. I claimed I needed to focus intensely on an upcoming exhibition, a plausible excuse given my work schedule. She was visibly disappointed, but understood, her natural empathy kicking in. I didn't tell her about the test results. Not yet. I needed more information first. Over the next 2 weeks, I meticulously began to dig. I discovered that Beatrice had active prescriptions for powerful anti-anxiety medication from 3 different doctors, and disturbing reports indicated she'd been steadily doubling and tripling her dosages for years. There were also hushed rumors circulating within St. Augustine's elite social circles, whispers of strange, erratic behavior at a neighbor's cocktail party, hushed accusations of stolen antique jewelry at her exclusive country club, unsettling stories her family had worked diligently to bury. I compiled every scrap of information, every damning detail, and then I waited patiently for my moment to strike. It arrived when Sophia casually mentioned her mother needed professional headshots for an upcoming charity gala's social media profile. She specifically asked if you would take them. "Adam," Sophia said, a hint of surprise in her voice at her mother's unexpected request. I agreed, my internal gears already whirring. The following Saturday, I arrived at their sprawling estate alone, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, a sealed, official-looking envelope clutched in my other hand. Beatrice was waiting, impeccably dressed, her makeup flawlessly applied. "Wallace is at the golf course," she explained, her voice airy. "A crucial business meeting." "Before we start," I began, my voice quiet, almost conversational, "I thought you might want to see this." I extended the envelope, containing Dr. Petrova's toxicology report along with irrefutable printouts of Beatrice's multiple prescriptions. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled visibly as she read, her eyes scanning the damning documents. "This is absurd," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I would never—" "We both know exactly what happened," I cut her off, my tone firm, leaving no room for denial. "What I don't know is why." Her face hardened, a mask of cold resentment replacing her initial shock. "You're not good enough for my daughter," she spat, her voice rising slightly. "You never will be. A man should provide security, stability, not pictures." "And drugging your daughter's husband provides security?" I kept my voice meticulously level, my control absolute. "It wasn't going to hurt you," she snapped, her composure slipping further. "Just make you sick, make you miss that ridiculous gallery opening you've been bragging about for months. Show Sophia that you're unreliable, unstable." I let her words hang in the air, the true depth of her malice laid bare. "Here's what happens next," I said, finally. "You're going to tell Wallace exactly what you did. Then both of you are going to start treating me with the respect I deserve. Not because you've suddenly had a change of heart about me, but because the alternative is Sophia finding out precisely who her parents truly are." Beatrice let out a brittle, hollow laugh. "She'll never believe you over us. We're her family." I picked up my camera bag, the weight a reassuring presence. "Maybe not, but she'll believe a certified lab report, an undeniable prescription records, and the neighbors you've alienated with your eccentricities. Are you willing to bet your relationship with your daughter on that?" I left without taking a single photograph. That night, Beatrice called Sophia in a torrent of manufactured tears, claiming I'd behaved inappropriately during our session, that I'd been hostile and threatening. When Sophia confronted me, her eyes wide with hurt and confusion, I couldn't hide the truth any longer. I showed her everything, the lab report, the prescription details, even a series of increasingly hostile text messages her mother had sent me over the past year, veiled threats wrapped in seemingly innocuous pleasantries. "My mother wouldn't do this," she kept repeating, but her voice lacked conviction, a tremor of doubt beginning to take root. The next day, she confronted her parents alone. I wasn't there, but when she returned home, her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, her shoulders slumped. "My father says it's all a misunderstanding," she said quietly, her voice flat. that you're trying to drive a wedge between us because you're insecure about your career." I just nodded, a grim sense of inevitability settling over me. I'd expected this. "What do you think?" I asked, my voice gentle, hopeful. She didn't answer. She simply crawled into bed, turning her back to me, pulling the covers over her head. I'd pushed back, exposed their deception, but somehow I'd fallen deeper into their insidious trap. Now, I was the villain in their expertly crafted narrative, and they'd managed to plant seeds of doubt in the one person whose opinion mattered most to me. For 2 agonizing weeks, Sophia barely spoke to me. She made solitary trips to her parents' house, returning with fresh tears and renewed skepticism in her eyes. I threw myself into my work, spending long, solitary hours editing footage in my studio, waiting for the storm to pass, for the inevitable truth to surface. Then a small package arrived for me. No return address, just my name scrolled across the top in unfamiliar, looping handwriting. Inside, nestled among layers of tissue paper, was a sleek USB drive and a short, handwritten note. "You should see this. Isla." My heart hammered in my chest. Isla, Sophia's brother Marcus's wife. I immediately plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained a series of video files, all time-stamped, all clearly from Wallace and Beatrice's home security system. The first file was from the night of the dinner. There was Beatrice in the kitchen, her movements furtive, clearly adding something from the dropper to a drink. There was me, entering the kitchen, taking the glasses. There was Wallace, unsuspecting, drinking from the tampered glass. But there was more, so much more. The subsequent footage was from after Sophia and I had left. Beatrice was screaming, her voice a shrill, venomous hiss, blaming Wallace for drinking the wrong glass. "This isn't the first time you've done something like this," Wallace roared back, his face contorted with rage. I watched the footage 3 times, trying to process the horrifying revelation. Not just irrefutable confirmation of Beatrice's actions, but undeniable evidence of a long-standing, sinister pattern. Evidence that Wallace knew. The next file was from 2 days after the dinner. Beatrice and Wallace were arguing in their opulent living room, their voices hushed, but seething, the subject of their venomous discussion me. "He knows what you did," Wallace muttered, pacing agitatedly. "So what?" Beatrice retorted, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's his word against mine. Sophia will never choose him over family, and if she does, then she's not the daughter I raised." Her voice was chillingly cold. "Don't worry, I've already started talking to her about their marriage problems, planting seeds. By the time I'm done, she'll be filing for divorce and thinking it was entirely her idea." I slammed my laptop shut, my hands trembling violently. This wasn't just about me. This was a systematic, calculated effort to control Sophia's entire life, to isolate her from anyone who didn't conform to their narrow, self-serving vision. And they'd been doing it for years. I called Isla immediately. "Why did you send this to me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because they did the exact same thing to me when I married Marcus," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a deep, lingering pain. "They tried to break us up for 2 years, told him I wasn't good enough, that I was a gold digger. It almost worked." "Why didn't you tell us?" I pressed, a wave of sickening understanding washing over me. "Marcus doesn't know," she admitted, her voice cracking. He worships his father. He believes everything Wallace says. I've tried to tell him, but he thinks I'm paranoid. I just couldn't watch them do it to someone else. Not anymore." The next day, I received a text from Wallace. We should talk man to man. No wives. I met him at his exclusive country club. He was waiting in a secluded private room, nursing a glass of expensive bourbon. "Adam," he began, his voice surprisingly cordial, almost warm. "Families are complicated. Wouldn't you agree? My wife, Beatrice, she can be difficult, overly protective, perhaps, but she means well." "Drugging someone means well?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. He waved his hand dismissively. A misunderstanding, a minor incident. Beatrice takes medication for anxiety. She probably just mixed up the glasses. I have the security footage, Wallace." His face changed instantly, hardening into something cold, calculating, utterly devoid of emotion. "What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I always knew you married Sophia for financial gain." "I want both of you to leave us alone," I said simply, my voice unwavering. "Stop trying to convince Sophia I'm not good enough. Stop interfering in our marriage." Wallace leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "You think this is the first time we've dealt with someone like you? People who want to take advantage of our family?" He let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Sophia will come home where she belongs. Adam, she always does. Ask her about Dominic. Ask her about the fiancé before you." I felt a sudden chill, a creeping dread. "What are you talking about?" "Sophia was engaged before she met you," he continued, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Nice guy, very successful doctor. But we didn't like his background. His family wasn't suitable. Took us 6 months to convince her he was wrong for her. She broke it off, came home crying to Daddy." He smiled, a chilling, triumphant expression. "History repeats itself, son." On the drive home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, I called Sophia's college roommate. "Chloe." I asked her about Dominic. "Oh, God," she said, her voice filled with a lingering sadness. "That was awful. He was perfect for her, absolutely adored her. But her parents, they systematically convinced her he was cheating, planted fake evidence. He tried to tell her the truth, but by then she didn't trust him anymore. It broke him." The pattern was terrifyingly clear now. This wasn't just about me. It was about absolute, suffocating control over their daughter's life. A toxic manipulation they'd perfected over decades, and they'd done it before. I didn't confront Sophia immediately. Instead, I started gathering every single piece of evidence I could find, every thread of their intricate web of deceit. I reached out to Dominic, who was initially reluctant to speak with me. When I explained the horrific situation, the full extent of Beatrice and Wallace's manipulations, he sent me old emails, text messages between him and Sophia, clearly showing how her parents had systematically undermined their relationship, feeding her lies, poisoning her trust. I contacted other ex-boyfriends, old friends of Sophia's who had mysteriously drifted away from her life. A chilling, undeniable pattern emerged. Anyone who encouraged Sophia's independence, anyone who fostered her self-reliance, was gradually, insidiously pushed out of her life. Isla, true to her word, provided even more damning security footage. Clips of Beatrice and Wallace discussing their long-term plans for us, once Sophia filed for divorce. "We'll convince her to move back home," Wallace said in one chilling clip. "She can run the foundation, meet suitable men." I compiled everything onto a single, encrypted drive. Then I invited Marcus and Isla over for dinner without telling Sophia my true intentions. Over dessert, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs, I connected my laptop to our living room TV. "There's something you both need to see," I said, my voice low, serious. For the next hour, we sat in stunned silence, watching the footage together. Sophia sat motionless beside me, her face pale, her eyes wide with a growing horror. Marcus kept shaking his head, muttering, "That's not my parents, that's not my parents," under his breath, his voice filled with disbelief and betrayal. When it was over, Sophia finally turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Because I needed you to see for yourself," I said, my voice gentle. "All of it. Not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your entire life." Marcus finally stood up, his face flushed with a furious indignation. "You've edited these videos. My parents wouldn't do this." Isla reached out, gently touching his arm. "They did it to us too. Marcus, why do you think they suddenly started liking me after we had Jasper? because a grandchild meant they had leverage, a new way to control us. The color drained from Marcus's face. You never told me. I tried, she whispered, tears in her own eyes. You wouldn't listen. Later that night, Sophia crawled into bed beside me, her body trembling slightly. I need time to process this, she said softly, her voice still raw with emotion. But I believe you, and I'm so sorry I doubted you. The next morning, Beatrice called. Sophia put her on speaker. Darling, I was thinking you should come stay with us for a while, Beatrice chirped, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Your father and I are worried about you. Marriage is hard, and sometimes a little separation can provide clarity. Mom, Sophia interrupted, her voice firm, resolute. I've seen the videos. A beat of stunned silence. Then, what videos? Beatrice's voice was suddenly strained, thin. The security footage of you drugging Adam's drink, Sophia continued, her voice gaining strength. Of you and Dad plotting to break up my marriage. Another agonizing pause. Sophia, Beatrice finally said, her voice laced with a desperate plea. Whatever he's shown you has been manipulated. You know Adam has always been jealous of our family, jealous of everything we've built. Stop, Sophia's voice was a steel trap, unyielding. We're coming over tonight, all of us. Marcus, Isla, Adam, and me. We're going to talk about this as a family. No more lies. After she hung up, Sophia turned to me, her eyes determined. They'll deny everything. They'll try to turn this around on you. I nodded. I know. So, she said, a glimmer of a mischievous smile playing on her lips. What's our plan? For the first time in weeks, I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I think it's time your parents met the real me, the one who doesn't just capture stories, but knows how to tell a story that cannot be denied. That night, we arrived at Wallace and Beatrice's house, my video camera equipment bag slung casually over my shoulder. Marcus and Isla were already there, sitting stiffly in the living room, their faces grim. Wallace, ever the master of facades, seemed remarkably confident, almost amused. I understand there's been a slight misunderstanding, he began, his voice smooth as silk. No misunderstanding, I interrupted, calmly setting up my tripod, my camera poised to record. I'm documenting this conversation for the family archives. Beatrice objected immediately, her voice sharp. This is private family business. Exactly, I agreed, my tone even. Family business, and I'm family, even though you've tried very, very hard to change that. For the next 2 hours, we laid it all out, a painstaking, devastating dissection of their years of manipulation and deceit. The drugged drink, the insidious emotional manipulation, Dominic's tragic story, the other ex-boyfriends, the suffocating pattern that had shaped Sophia and Marcus's entire lives. Wallace and Beatrice denied everything, of course. They called me unstable, manipulative, a gold digger. But with each frantic denial, I played another damning clip, showed another incriminating email, displayed another archived text message. Their faces grew paler, their denials weaker, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. Finally, Sophia stood up, her voice clear and strong, unwavering. I love you both. You're my parents. But what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control my life anymore. Marcus nodded, his own face etched with a profound sadness. We're adults. We choose our own partners, our own paths. Beatrice began to cry, not from remorse, but from the dawning, terrifying realization that she was irrevocably losing control, her carefully constructed kingdom crumbling before her eyes. Wallace just looked stunned, as if he couldn't comprehend that his children, his carefully molded creations, were openly defying him. As we prepared to leave, the silence in the room thick with unspoken tension, I handed Wallace a sleek, black USB drive. This contains everything, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The footage, the emails, the testimonies. It's yours to keep. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked suspiciously, his brow furrowed. "It means that I'm not going to ruin your carefully curated reputation by sharing this with anyone else," I explained, meeting his gaze directly. "That would hurt Sophia, and I would never do that." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "But if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, if you ever try to manipulate Sophia or speak against me, copies will go to every member of your country club, your business partners, and your precious social circle. Do we understand each other?" For the first time since I'd met him, Wallace looked at me with something resembling raw, unadulterated respect, a grudging acknowledgment of my unwavering resolve. "I underestimated you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Yes," I said simply, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. "You did." 6 months passed. Sophia and Marcus began attending therapy, diligently working through the deep emotional scars their parents had inflicted. Beatrice and Wallace kept their distance, sending occasional, clipped texts, but for the first time, they respected the boundaries we had established. Then, over the holidays, they extended an invitation to us all for dinner. "A fresh start," the ornate card read. Sophia wanted to go. "They're still my parents," she said, her voice filled with a tentative hope. "And they're trying." I agreed, but I wasn't naive enough to believe they had truly changed. When we arrived, everything seemed eerily normal. Beatrice had prepared a magnificent feast. Wallace was charming, asking about my latest film projects with what appeared to be genuine interest, a surprising departure from his usual disdain. After dinner, Wallace invited me into his study. "I have a proposition for you, Adam," he said smoothly, pouring me a glass of amber-colored scotch. "I've been thinking about your career. Videography is, well, it's been good to you. But have you considered diversifying? I could bring you into my firm. Junior partner track. The salary would be substantial, a real future." I took the glass but didn't drink, the sharp, smoky aroma doing little to mask the underlying current of his true intentions. "Why would you do that, Wallace?" "Your family," he said smoothly, a calculating glint in his eyes. "And I respect how you handled the unpleasantness. You protected my daughter while standing your ground. That's what a real man does." I set the untouched glass down on his polished desk. "I appreciate the offer, Wallace, truly, but no." His smile tightened, a barely perceptible shift in his demeanor. "Adam, be reasonable. This is an olive branch, a way for us to move forward, for everyone to benefit." "No," I repeated, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "It's another attempt at control. You can't buy me, Wallace, and you can't stand the fact that Sophia loves me exactly as I am, a videographer, living life on my own terms." "Don't be a fool," he hissed, his mask finally slipping, his true, contemptuous nature laid bare. "Everyone has a price." I stood up, my gaze steady, unwavering. "That's where you're wrong, Wallace, and that's why you'll never truly understand your daughter." I walked back to the dining room, leaving him simmering in his opulent study. Beatrice was showing Sophia old photo albums, her voice saccharine. "Look at these, darling. You were so happy when you lived at home." Sophia caught my eye across the room. She could see from my expression that something had happened, that the fragile peace had been disturbed. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and she stood up, her posture straight, her gaze steady. "Ma, Dad," she announced clearly, her voice echoing slightly in the sudden silence of the room. "I have something to tell you." Everyone turned to look at her, their attention rapt. "Adam and we're having a baby. I'm 3 months pregnant." The shock on their faces was genuine, a rare display of raw, unscripted emotion. Beatrice recovered first, rushing to embrace her daughter, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of genuine joy and perhaps a renewed sense of potential control. Wallace approached more slowly, his gaze darting between Sophia and me, a complex array of emotions warring on his face. "Congratulations," he said stiffly, extending a hand to Sophia, then, with a brief, almost imperceptible hesitation to me. "Thank you," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Then, lowering my voice so only he could hear, I added, "This child will never be a pawn in your games, Wallace. I promise you that." His face hardened, a flicker of defiance in his eyes, but he nodded once. He understood the message. As we drove home that night, the car filled with a quiet contentment, Sophia squeezed my hand. "They'll never truly change, will they?" she murmured, her voice soft. "No," I said honestly, meeting her gaze. "But they'll have to accept that they can't change us. And sometimes, Sophia, that's enough." 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Wallace's attorney. Inside, to our astonishment, was a deed to our house, the charming little bungalow we had been renting for years, and legal documents establishing a generous trust fund for our unborn child. There was no note, no conditions, no hidden strings attached, just the clean, irrevocable transfer of assets. It wasn't an apology. Wallace wasn't capable of that. But it was an acknowledgment, perhaps the only one he could truly give, that we had won. Our daughter was born in the summer, a beautiful, healthy girl with Sophia's bright eyes and my stubborn chin. We named her Clara, after my adventurous grandmother. When Beatrice and Wallace came to the hospital, they brought extravagant gifts, but maintained a respectful distance, a stark contrast to their usual intrusive behavior. They cooed over the baby, took countless photos, and left without attempting to give us parenting advice or financial lectures. Months passed. Our relationship with them settled into something resembling a fragile normalcy. They never apologized for what they'd done, but they stopped trying to control Sophia's life or undermine my career. One evening, as I was editing footage in my studio, Sophia came in, Clara nestled comfortably on her hip. "My mother called," she said, her voice thoughtful. "She wants us to come for Christmas." I looked up from my computer, considering the proposition. "What do you want to do?" "I think we should go," she replied, a hint of steel in her voice, "but with conditions. We stay at a hotel, not their house. We leave when we want to leave. No unsupervised time with Clara." I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "Sounds perfectly reasonable." She sat down beside me, bouncing Clara gently. "You know, I used to think success meant making my parents happy, getting their approval, meeting their endless expectations. And now," she looked down at our beautiful daughter, then back at me, her eyes shining with a profound realization. "Now, I know it's about making choices I can be proud of, standing by the people I love, and building a life that is truly our own." 2 weeks before Christmas, a large, heavy envelope arrived from Wallace. Inside was a glossy, impeccably designed brochure for his company's annual report. My photographs were featured prominently throughout, breathtaking landscapes, insightful portraits of his business partners, striking architectural shots of his latest developments. The work I'd done on my own terms, without his interference, without his guidance. There was a brief, almost curt note tucked inside. "Hired the best videographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy. W." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was something else entirely. Respect, perhaps. The grudging acknowledgement that I was successful on my own terms, not his. I didn't call to thank him. We both understood this wasn't about gratitude. It was about recognizing the new boundaries, the new, unyielding reality we had forged. That spring, I opened my own gallery and studio in downtown St. Augustine, a spacious, light-filled space where I could showcase my work and meet clients. At the grand opening, Sophia stood proudly beside me, Clara nestled securely on her hip. My parents flew in from Colorado, their faces beaming with pride. Friends and clients filled the vibrant space, admiring the images and films I'd captured over the years. Wallace and Beatrice came too, toward the end of the evening. They didn't stay long. Beatrice held Clara briefly, her usual possessiveness tempered by Sophia's watchful eye. Wallace shook my hand, nodding at the photographs with what appeared to be genuine approval, and left without making a single suggestion about how I should run my business. As we locked up that night, the city lights twinkling around us, Sophia leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think they've changed?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. I considered the question carefully, weighing my words. "No," I said finally, "honestly, but they've accepted that they can't change us. And sometimes, Sophia, that's enough." Later, as we sat on our porch, watching the stars emerge over the historic city, Clara asleep peacefully in her crib upstairs, I realized something I'd never fully articulated before. I hadn't won by playing Wallace and Beatrice's manipulative game. I'd won by refusing to play it at all. I'd stood my ground, protected what mattered most, and built my life according to my own definition of success, not with schemes or cunning, but with unwavering honesty and quiet, persistent determination. In the end, that was the most satisfying victory of all, living well, on my own terms, with the family I loved fiercely beside me.